A dramatic row between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy has completely derailed Ukraine's efforts to secure a wartime deal with the United States. Talks at the Oval Office descended into a fiery argument with President Trump accusing President Zelenskyy of being disrespectful and gambling with World War III. A senior White House official says Trump now has no interest in the minerals deal that was meant to be signed in exchange for America's military support.
What began as a polite meeting between U.S. President Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy quickly turned into an unprecedented exchange at the Oval Office.
Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No,
Can
you've
I
done a lot
answer?
of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
You're not winning this.
I.
You have a damn good chance of
we
coming
are
out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank
president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
Yes. What about
if you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of
accept
times
that
thank
there,
you
accept
to
that,
American people.
accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I
over
understand,
there.
sir.
I think it's
I
very
understand.
important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell you
You're
again,
running
I
low
know.
on soldiers.
Don't-
Listen,
don't, please,
you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then
President.
then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what-
that
what
wasn't
this
with me.
means. It
That was
wasn't
with
with you.
a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
But this
That
is
was
your,
with,
this
that was
is
with
your
Obama.
president. It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful.
White House staff asked the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy to leave, with the relationship between U.S. and Ukraine at an all-time low.
Let's go live to Washington for DW's Benjamin Alvarez Gruber. An unprecedented set of events today. How did it come to this heated exchange?
Unprecedented set of events indeed. What happened at the White House today will go down in history. Our colleagues who have been covering the U.S. presidents, in plural, for years have told us they never have seen anything like this. An exchange that got heated pretty quickly after this rather friendly meeting outside of the White House West Wing. But what followed afterwards was pretty much as remarkable, because according to an official from the White House, Trump, after this exchange, met with his key advisors immediately afterwards. That's when he allegedly decided that Zelenskyy was not in a place to negotiate. He directed Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his national security advisor to deliver the message to Zelenskyy and to his delegation, telling them that it was time to leave. And from there on, the joint lunch and also the press conference, it was cancelled. According to this official, the Ukrainians wanted to continue the talks, but the White House said no. And shortly after, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy left the compound.
And Benjamin, you know what's really telling? Let's just listen into how the chat wound up.
And your people are very brave, but you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television, I will say that.
Now, this isn't an episode of The Apprentice, but what's this say about Trump, the deal maker? He's had Macron there this week, then Starmer, both talks polite in comparison. Now Zelenskyy, but in all cases, no deal.
That's right, and there was this mineral deal that was supposed to be signed by both leaders that is now off the table, at least for now, because it was not signed. That's what we heard from the US side, and there's really no path forward yet. Before heading to spend his weekend in Mar-a-Lago, the president told us on the South Lawn that Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, and I quote him here, pretty much overplayed his hand. We're looking for peace, and by seeing also so many reactions pouring in from shocked European leaders, and also by a former Russian President Medvedev, who called Zelenskyy, and I quote again, an insolent pig. This pretty much sums up who wins and who loses with the scenes that unfolded in Washington today.
Yeah, there's been global reaction. What about the domestic political reaction, which seems to be pretty much down party lines?
That's right. The domestic political reactions are pretty much down on party lines. The White House sent out an email with many of those reactions too. And the first reaction actually that we got at the White House in front of the West Wing was a man that is really, you could say, an ally of Ukraine, that has been saying that the U.S. needs to support Ukraine. And that's the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who called Zelenskyy to resign. Many of those voices from the Republicans, while Democrats are saying that they feel deeply ashamed by the scenes in the Oval Office today.
What about the response from Zelenskyy himself? He didn't get to say much in that meeting.
That's right. There was supposed to be a discussion at one political think tank here in D.C. that was cancelled. But afterwards, Zelenskyy gave an interview to Fox News saying that the relationships between Ukraine and the United States can still be repaired. He said that the ties between both countries are about more than two presidents. He added that Ukraine badly needs Washington's help in fighting against Russia's far bigger and better armed military. He said it will be difficult to join without their support. But just let's listen in to what the Ukrainian president, who, as you just said, didn't get to say much during the meeting, told U.S. media after visiting the White House.
I respect American people, and if I think that we have to be very open and very honest, and I'm not sure that we did something bad. I think maybe sometimes some things we have to discuss out of media, with all respect to democracy and to a free media. But there are things that where we have to understand the position of Ukraine and Ukrainians.
So what is the position of Ukraine? Where does this all leave Ukraine? You mentioned the minerals deal is off the table.
And what are the other options? What will happen afterwards? Well, because we heard also that Ukrainian President Zelenskyy also met with a bipartisan group of senators, so Republicans and also Democrats. He tweeted after the meeting thanking the U.S., but there are so many questions that remain, and I think that we still will need a couple of days, if not weeks, to actually process what happened today. What does this mean, not just for this administration, but also for future administration, and also how European leaders will react, as many are saying this is not just the time for posting, sending out press releases or tweets, but actually to follow up and to take a stance supporting Ukraine, and seeing that actually the U.S. is not the reliable partner for Ukraine that many thought or many hoped for Washington to be in this fight against Russia.
Yeah, I think we're all suffering from shock right now, not just Zelenskyy, as we saw there on his face. DW's Benjamin Alvarez Gruber in Washington, D.C. Thank you. Well, Donald Trump spoke to reporters as he was leaving the White House for Florida and said he wants peace in Ukraine.
We had a meeting today, as you know, with President Zelenskyy, and I would say it didn't work out exactly great from his standpoint. I think he very much overplayed his hand. We're looking for peace. we're not looking for somebody that's going to sign up as strong power and then not make peace because they feel emboldened, and that's what I saw happening. I'm looking for peace. We're not looking to go into a 10-year war and play games. We want peace. And it was just my impression that if we do that, if we sign up, he's looking for something that I'm not looking for. He's looking to go on and fight. We're looking to end the death.
And let's go over to Brussels for DW's very own Teri Schultz. There's consternation among European leaders tonight over Zelensky's dismissal from the White House. What are you hearing?
That's right, Ben. European leaders very much taking the side of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, aside from Viktor Orban, the Hungarian prime minister, who always sides with Donald Trump. They are very much feeling that what was done to Zelenskyy also was done to them, coming out immediately and saying that President Zelenskyy, you do not walk alone. Some, including High Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, going so far as to say what happened in the White House shows that the free world needs a new leader, meaning other than the United States. There were coordinated responses from the presidents of the European Commission, the European Council, and the European Parliament, saying that President Zelenskyy's dignity honors his people and telling him to continue to be strong, be brave, and be fearless. So in doing this, European leaders very much know that this could be seen by the White House as taking a stand against Donald Trump. So they must have considered their words quite carefully when they put out these messages. But it's very clear that Europeans feel that their future and Ukraine's are indivisible.
We've heard that the EU can't replace the US when it comes to military support, that we've heard time and again that Europe's not ready to take up such a role. What do you think? You've got a lot of experience when it comes to NATO, when it comes to the war games, the drills that have been held throughout Europe. Where do we stand?
That's right. And when I say that Europe feels that its future and Ukraine's are indivisible, when things like this happen to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, it does raise this angst among European leaders that they too might have to go it alone, that they'll be cut off from U.S. support. And there's been this rush of studies about whether Europe could go it alone. And the answer is right now, no, they can't. But they're very much looking at where they need to scale up most quickly, just in case that's possible. And I think that we're going to hear a lot more about this. For example, on Sunday in London, when Keir Starmer has called together about a dozen leaders, they were very much going to focus on what Europe needs to do to help Ukraine. It's also going to be about what they need to do to help themselves, Ben.
Yep, well, Starmer pointed out that the UK needs to up its game, and it's such a big backer of Ukraine. But it sounds like the European leaders are going to have to do so much more than they expected.
Certainly, this is not a situation any of them could have imagined being in. They very much hoped with the visits of Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer to Washington this week that it would have laid out a path for Zelenskyy to warm up his ties with Donald Trump, to sign this deal on mineral deposits so that they would be moving in this weekend to a different phase where they actually could start to talk more about a ceasefire, possibly about a European peacekeeping force. That is not going to be where they all are at all today. And speaking of Starmer, he spoke after this debacle with both Zelenskyy and with Trump. So he's very much trying to play the peacemaker here. Of course, they would have wanted that to be making peace between Ukraine and Russia and not Ukraine and the United States.
Exactly. You couldn't have summed up it any better. Teri Schultz, our Brussels correspondent. Great speaking to you tonight. Let's bring in Professor Angela Stent of Georgetown University. She served as National Intelligence Officer for Russia and Eurasia at the National Intelligence Council. Do you think Trump and Zelenskyy entered the meeting today intending to sign a deal?
Well, the deal was actually on the table and the pens were there. I think they probably both did. The Ukrainians had some questions about the deal, but in principle, my understanding is that they were going to sign a deal. I think it's quite possible that President Trump and Vice President Vance, before this meeting began, knew that they were going to really take Zelenskyy to task. It's quite extraordinary. Normally, if you have leaders meeting and they have disagreements, they do it behind closed doors. But certainly when the vice president started attacking Zelenskyy, it really looked to some extent as if it was a setup. So maybe they weren't that interested in signing the minerals deal, although people say that it could still be signed, but clearly not this week.
How much of this could be show for Trump to boost his popularity ratings, for example?
Well, you heard that what he said at the end was, this will make great television. So I do think there was an element there of, again, that they kind of had prearranged this. And he wants to show to his supporters that, he's going to get the Ukrainians to agree to what he wants to do. So that could well be. That's why I think it wasn't all spontaneous.
This must be the best day Putin's had since he started the war.
Oh, I mean, the Russians are absolutely thrilled. They don't know what happened. You have the former president, briefly, Dmitry Medvedev, writing some really scurrilous things on social media about President Zelenskyy. But yes, this is such a boon for the Kremlin to have Zelenskyy humiliated like this by the U.S. president, although he did stand his ground. But yeah, they must be amazed by what's happened.
How do you think China views all this?
So I think the Chinese are looking at this, and I think they also realize that clearly the U.S. is not standing by the country that it's supported in this war for the last 3 years, actually more than that, really. And they're realizing, and people are already questioning, would the U.S. in fact defend Taiwan if the Chinese were somehow to attack it? And so I think what they would take from this is also comfort in seeing that that might not happen. So
has Ukraine's fate been sealed, or is all this part of the deal-making process?
Well, I don't think its fate has been sealed. Europe, I think, has woken up. It certainly woke up at the Munich Security Conference, if not before, that it's going to have to do much more if it doesn't want Ukraine to be defeated, that the U.S. is not going to be supporting them, that probably it wouldn't even backstop European troops if there were European peacekeeping forces there. So I think it's not the end yet, but it's going to be much more difficult because Europe doesn't have the same military resources to provide Ukraine, and they're still debating whether they can use these $300 billion of Russian frozen assets to support Ukraine. So the game isn't over, but it's going to get much more difficult, particularly if U.S. assistance is halted now.
Halted? So what are you saying, zero U.S. support?
Well, at the moment, there's still money in the pipeline that's going there, but, it could be severely diminished. Let's put it that way. And that's a real prospect that I think the Ukrainians understand.
Now, Europe's been trying to get its game together and boost its defences. There have been war games. There's been talk of rapid action forces and a lot of practice. But is Europe in a position to step up and replace the US?
It can't replace the U.S. completely. Again, it doesn't have the weapons. It doesn't have the financial resources. It can certainly do more. And I think that's why, again, you're going to have another meeting in a couple of days, I think, with European leaders about how they can continue to support Ukraine. But it cannot be at the same level as the U.S. That doesn't mean that the Ukrainians won't go on fighting, because they will. And, you should remind your viewers, there's absolutely no evidence that Vladimir Putin wants a peace deal. President Trump would like to have a peace deal, but what the Russians want is what they're getting, a reestablishment of relations with the U.S., that the U.S. saying that the Ukrainians should accept many of the terms that the Russians want. So, and that means that this war could go on for quite a long time.
The other thing we should point out too is that this is not a game. Angela Stent, thank you very much for joining us from Georgetown University.
Thank you.